In the cold rain of midnight, the empty streets of Hawthorne wait for no one. A poor biker, just off a long shift, rides his old Harley home. It's just him, and the aging dog riding behind him. Then the dog suddenly stiffens. Under a flickering streetlight, two elderly people lie on the roadside, robbed, injured, the last of their hospital money gone. The man struggles to breathe through blood and rain. The woman shakes as she calls her husband's name. No money, no phone, no one stopping. Only one stranger who cuts the engine and faces a choice that could save their lives, or pull him into a night with no way out. Hawthorne, Pennsylvania, was quiet late at night, but not peaceful. The city was old, built long before comfort became a priority. Brick buildings stood close together, many of them empty now. Storefronts were dark, windows covered with wood or old metal bars. The streetlights were few and weak, leaving long stretches of road in shadow. Winter made everything harder. That night, the temperature was just above freezing. Snow had fallen earlier in the evening, but it had turned into cold rain by midnight. The rain soaked the streets, covered the sidewalks, and made the asphalt slippery. Water collected in shallow puddles that reflected the dull yellow light of the lamps. The wind was steady and cold, cutting through jackets and gloves. It was not a night anyone wanted to be outside. Jack Miller rode through the city anyway. Jack was 48 years old. He was tall, with a lean body shaped by years of physical work. His shoulders were broad, but his movements were careful, as if he was used to pain. His face was rough, with a short beard showing streaks of gray. A thin scar ran along his jaw, a reminder of a past injury. His eyes were light gray, focused and alert, always watching the road and everything around it. Jack wore an old black leather jacket. The leather was worn soft and thin from years of use. It was no longer warm enough for winter, but Jack kept it on. Under the jacket, he wore a plain work shirt and heavy gloves. His boots were scuffed and stained with oil. He rode an old Harley-Davidson motorcycle. The bike was loud and far from perfect. The paint was chipped, the chrome dull, and the headlight flickered when the road got rough. But the engine still worked, and Jack trusted it. He fixed it himself when it broke. It was the only vehicle he owned. Behind Jack, sitting on a special seat with straps and padding, was Buddy. Buddy was a yellow Labrador retriever, old and heavy, with gray fur around his muzzle and eyes. His body was strong but stiff, especially in the cold. He wore a faded red harness with reflective strips. Buddy had once been a trained search and rescue dog. He had worked with emergency teams years ago, helping find people after storms and accidents. Now he was slower, but his mind was still sharp. Buddy sat calmly on the bike, balanced and steady. He did not move unless necessary. He trusted Jack completely, and Jack trusted him in return. Jack had just finished a long shift at a small garage on the east side of Hawthorne. He worked there fixing delivery vans and old cars. The job paid little, but it paid regularly. Jack needed that. He lived in a small rented room above the garage. Most of his money went to rent, food, and keeping the motorcycle running. As Jack rode home, the engine humming beneath him, he kept his speed low. The road was wet and dangerous. He had learned long ago not to rush at night. Buddy leaned forward slightly, watching the road ahead. The wind pushed against his ears, but he stayed calm. They passed empty streets, closed shops, and dark houses. Rain tapped against Jack's helmet and jacket. The sound of the engine and the rain filled the night. Then Buddy stiffened. Jack felt it immediately. Buddy's body tensed, and a low sound came from his throat. It was not loud, but it was urgent. Jack slowed the bike and eased toward the side of the road. "What is it, Buddy?" Jack said, his voice low. Buddy did not turn his head. His eyes were fixed ahead, near the sidewalk under a streetlight. Jack followed Buddy's gaze. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then he noticed movement near the curb. Jack stopped the bike. He shut off the engine and listened. Rain, wind, no voices, no traffic nearby. Then he saw them. An elderly man lay on the wet asphalt near the edge of the road. His body was turned slightly to the side, one arm bent under him. Blood ran from a cut on his head, mixing with rainwater on the street. His coat was torn, and his breathing was shallow. Beside him, an elderly woman knelt on the ground. Her knees were soaked, her hands shaking as she tried to hold the man's head still. She wore a thin beige coat that offered little protection from the cold. Her gray hair was loose and wet, sticking to her face. Jack ran toward them. "Sir," Jack said as he knelt down, "can you hear me?" The man groaned softly, but did not open his eyes. The woman looked up at Jack. Her eyes were wide with fear. "They took it," she said quickly. They took our bag. They pushed him." Jack looked down the street. It was empty. "When?" Jack asked. "Ain't just now," she said. They ran that way. Her name was Helen Wilson. She was 73 years old. Her face showed years of worry and care, but also strength. Even in fear, she stayed close to her husband, keeping one hand on his chest. The man was Frank Wilson, 75 years old. He had a thin face and rough hands, the kind that showed a lifetime of hard work. His skin was pale, and his pulse was fast and uneven. Buddy approached slowly and carefully. He lay down beside Frank, pressing his body against the man's side to share warmth. His head rested near Frank's chest. Helen gasped softly. "The dog." "He's helping," Jack said. "He's trained." Helen swallowed hard. "Our money," she said. "It's gone. All of it. We were on our way to the hospital. Frank needs treatment. That was everything we saved." Jack nodded slowly. He had heard similar words before. Frank stirred and whispered, "Helen?" "I'm here," she said, leaning closer. "I'm here." Jack took off his leather jacket and wrapped it around Frank's shoulders. The old man shivered violently. "We can't stay here," Jack said. "It's too cold." Helen looked around. "We don't have a phone. They took my purse." "That's okay," Jack said. "I'll take care of it." Jack carefully lifted Frank. Pain shot through his lower back, but he ignored it. He had carried heavier weight before. Buddy stood and stayed close, ready to follow. Rain continued to fall as Jack turned away from the empty street. He did not know what would happen next. He only knew one thing. He was not leaving them there. Jack moved carefully as he carried Frank away from the road. The rain continued to fall, soaking his clothes and making the ground slick. Frank was lighter than Jack expected, but his weight still pulled hard on Jack's back and shoulders. Pain spread through Jack's lower spine, sharp and familiar, but he ignored it. He focused on keeping Frank steady and upright. Helen followed close behind, her steps uneven. She held her arms tight against her chest, shivering badly. Every few steps, she looked at Frank's face, checking if he was still breathing. Buddy stayed close on Frank's other side, walking slowly, matching Jack's pace. His head stayed near Frank's chest, his body pressed close whenever possible. He did not pull away, even when rain soaked his fur. Jack reached the motorcycle and stopped. He knew immediately that he could not put Frank on the bike. The road was too dangerous, and Frank's condition was too unstable. Jack looked down the street again, still empty. "No ambulance," Jack muttered. "No phone, no money." Helen heard him and looked frightened. "Is he going to die?" she asked quietly. Jack met her eyes. "Not if I can help it." He helped Frank sit against a low wall near the sidewalk. Frank's eyes opened briefly. They were unfocused, but he was conscious. "Easy," Jack said. "Don't move." Frank swallowed hard. "Helen, did they take it?" "Yes," Helen said, her voice breaking. "But you stay with me. That's what matters." Jack checked Frank's pulse again. Still fast, still uneven. "We need shelter," Jack said. "Somewhere dry and warm." Helen nodded. "Anywhere." Jack knew one place. A few blocks away, behind the garage where he worked, there was an old storage building. It used to hold parts and scrap metal. Now it was mostly empty, but it had a roof, walls, and a door that still closed. Jack had slept there more than once when he could not afford rent. "It's not far," Jack said. "I can get us there." He stood again and lifted Frank, this time adjusting his grip to ease the strain. Frank groaned softly, but did not resist. They moved slowly through the rain. Jack's boot slipped once, and he nearly lost balance, but Buddy pressed against Frank and helped keep him steady. Helen walked close, one hand on Jack's arm when she could manage it. The city around them felt empty. Stores were closed, windows were dark. The rain drowned out distant sounds. After several long minutes, they reached the building. Jack pushed the door open with his shoulder. It creaked loudly, but gave way. Inside, the air was cold but dry. The smell of oil, dust, and old metal hung in the space. Jack laid Frank down on a stack of flattened cardboard near the wall. He took off his gloves and rubbed Frank's hands to bring some warmth back into them. Helen sank down beside her husband, exhausted. Her breathing was shallow, and her face was pale. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, looking at Jack. "We didn't mean to be trouble." Jack shook his head. "You're not trouble." Buddy lay down on the other side of Frank, pressing close again. His body heat helped, and Frank's shivering slowed slightly. Jack searched the room. He found an old blanket in a corner and shook the dust off. He wrapped it over Frank and Helen both. "Drink?" Jack asked. Helen shook her head. "I'm fine." "He's not." Frank's breathing changed. It became slower, but more strained. Jack crouched beside him. "Frank," he said clearly, "can you hear me?" Frank opened his eyes again. "Yeah," he whispered. "Chest hurts." Jack nodded. "I know. Try to breathe slow." Jack had seen this before, too many times. He had no medical equipment, no medication, no phone to call for help. Helen looked at him, fear clear in her eyes. "He has heart problems," she said, "and kidney failure. He needs treatment. That money, it was for tomorrow morning." Jack clenched his jaw. "How long has he been feeling like this?" Jack asked. "Since earlier today," Helen said. "But we couldn't call a taxi. We don't have a credit card. We don't trust banks, so we carried cash." Jack nodded slowly. "Okay." He stood and searched his pockets. He had a few dollars, not enough for anything useful. "I'm going to get something to make a small fire," Jack said. "Stay with him." He stepped outside into the rain again. Buddy stayed behind with Frank and Helen. Jack found broken wood and old pallets behind the building. He dragged what he could inside and stacked it near the wall. He lit it carefully using a lighter he carried. The fire was small, but it gave some warmth. Helen watched the flames with tired eyes. "You live like this?" she asked quietly. "Sometimes," Jack said honestly. Frank shifted slightly. "You a soldier?" he asked weakly. Jack nodded. "Was." Frank nodded once. "I can tell." They fell quiet for a moment. Then Frank's body stiffened. He gasped sharply, his hand clutching his chest. Helen cried out, "Frank!" Jack dropped to his knees beside him. "Easy, easy." Frank's breathing became uneven again. His eyes rolled slightly. Buddy reacted immediately. He lifted his head and pressed his muzzle against Frank's chest. He let out a low, steady sound from deep in his throat, as if urging Frank to keep breathing. Jack placed his hands on Frank's shoulders. "Frank, look at me. Stay with us." Helen grabbed Frank's hand, tears running down her face. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't leave me." Jack focused. He blocked out everything else. His hands moved with purpose, guided by memory and training. Buddy did not move away. He stayed pressed close, warm and solid. Slowly, Frank's breathing steadied. He did not lose consciousness, but he was clearly weak. Jack let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. Helen leaned forward and rested her forehead against Frank's hand. She was shaking. "Thank you," she said to Buddy, her voice breaking. She reached out and touched the dog's head. Buddy accepted the touch quietly. Jack leaned back against the wall, exhausted. His back burned with pain, and his hands shook slightly. He forced them still. They sat like that for a long time. The fire crackled softly. Rain continued to fall outside. Jack knew this was not enough. He knew Frank needed a hospital. He knew Helen had no money left. He knew he had almost nothing himself. But one thing was clear. They could not go back to the street. Jack looked at Buddy, then at Frank and Helen. "We'll figure something out," he said quietly. "I promise." Buddy lifted his head and looked at Jack, as if agreeing. For now, it was the only promise Jack could make. The fire burned low after midnight. Jack added small pieces of wood one at a time, careful not to let the flames grow too high. The building was old, and he did not want to risk smoke or sparks. The warmth helped, but it was not enough to chase the cold away completely. The air inside the storage building stayed damp and heavy. Frank lay on his back, wrapped in the blanket, his breathing shallow and uneven. His face looked gray in the firelight. Every few minutes, his chest rose sharply, then fell too fast. Helen sat beside him, holding his hand with both of hers. Her fingers were stiff from the cold. She rubbed them together whenever she could, then returned them to Frank's hand. She had stopped crying, but her eyes were red and swollen. Jack sat against the wall a few feet away, his back pressed against the cold concrete, and pain spread slowly through his lower spine. He shifted his weight carefully, trying to find a position that hurt less. His hands rested on his knees, and he forced them to stay still. Buddy lay close to Frank, his body stretched along the old man's side. He kept his head near Frank's chest, his ears lifting slightly whenever Frank's breathing changed. Buddy did not sleep. Jack watched the clock on his phoneless wrist, guessing at the time. It felt like hours had passed, but the night did not seem to move. Helen broke the silence. "He hasn't missed a treatment before," she said quietly. Not once. Jack nodded. I believe you. He hates hospitals, Helen continued, but he goes, every time. He says promises matter. Frank's eyes opened slightly. Still do, he murmured. Helen leaned closer. Rest. Don't talk. Frank's lips twitched into something close to a smile. Bossy, he whispered. Jack looked away, giving them privacy. A sudden change in Frank's breathing pulled his attention back. Frank gasped and brought his hand weakly toward his chest. Buddy reacted immediately. He stood and placed his front paws closer, lowering his head and pressing his muzzle against Frank's ribs. A low sound came from his throat, steady and firm. Jack was on his feet in a second. Frank, Jack said clearly, look at me. Frank's eyes rolled toward him. Sweat broke out on his forehead despite the cold. Helen's voice shook. Jack, please. Jack crouched beside Frank and placed 2 fingers on his neck. The pulse was fast and weak. We need to move, Jack said. We can't wait here. Helen looked around in panic. How? We have nothing. Jack stood and walked a few steps away, his boots scraping against the floor. He pressed his hands into his face and took a slow breath. His mind ran through options, most of them bad. No phone, no money, no car he could safely use in this weather. Then he remembered something. Behind the building, there was an old office space that used to belong to the garage owner. Sometimes the phone line still worked. It's a long shot, Jack said, but I might be able to call someone. Helen nodded quickly. Anything. Jack looked at Buddy. Stay with him. Buddy did not move. His eyes stayed on Frank. Jack stepped into the rain again, moving fast despite the pain in his back. He reached the small office and forced the door open. Inside, it smelled of dust and oil. He searched the wall and found the phone. He lifted the receiver, a dial tone. Jack let out a breath. He dialed the only number he could think of. It rang several times before someone answered. Yeah? A rough voice said. Tom, Jack said. It's Jack Miller. There was a pause. Haven't heard from you in a while. I need help, Jack said. Right now. Another pause. Where are you? Jack gave the location quickly. An old man's having heart trouble. We got robbed. No money, no phone. Weather's bad. Tom sighed. You always find trouble. Or it finds me, Jack said. Silence then. I'll see what I can do. Jack hung up and ran back. Inside the storage building, Frank's breathing had slowed again, but his eyes were half closed. Helen was talking to him softly, repeating his name. Buddy stayed pressed close, unmoving. I made a call, Jack said. Someone's trying to help. Helen nodded, tears spilling again. Thank you. Time passed slowly. Jack sat beside Frank now, ready to move if needed. His back screamed with pain, but he ignored it. Buddy suddenly lifted his head and sniffed the air. He stood and walked toward the far corner of the building. He sniffed along the wall, then pawed at something hidden under debris. Jack stood. What is it, Buddy? Buddy barked once and nudged a dusty box forward. Jack opened it. Inside were old first aid supplies, bandages, gloves, a cracked thermometer. Good boy, Jack said quietly. He wrapped fresh bandages around Frank's head and wiped away dried blood. Helen watched closely, grateful. Frank's breathing steadied slightly. The fire burned lower again. Outside, the rain slowed, but the cold remained. Jack knew the night was far from over, but for now, Frank was alive, and Jack stayed. The rain finally slowed sometime after 3 in the morning. Inside the storage building, the air felt colder, without the sound of rain to distract from it. The fire had burned down to embers. Jack added another piece of wood, then sat back on his heels, breathing through the pain in his back. Frank was still conscious, but barely. His eyes opened now and then, unfocused. His breathing remained shallow, and his skin felt cool to the touch. Helen had stopped talking. She sat quietly beside him, holding his hand, watching every small movement of his chest. Her face looked older in the dim light, the lines deeper, her shoulders slumped from exhaustion. Buddy lay stretched along Frank's side, his body pressed close. His head rested near Frank's chest, and his ears twitched whenever Frank's breathing changed. Buddy had not moved away once during the night. Jack checked Frank's pulse again. It was weak. We can't wait much longer, Jack said quietly. Helen looked up. Is he dying? Jack did not answer right away. He chose his words carefully. He's running out of strength. Helen nodded slowly. She had already understood. Tom hasn't called back, Jack said. Phones might be down. Helen swallowed. Then what do we do? Jack stood and paced a few steps, then stopped. His boots scraped softly against the concrete. He rubbed his lower back, his face tight with pain. "There is one thing," Jack said. "I don't like it." Helen leaned forward slightly. "Tell me." "I can try to move him myself," Jack said. "There's an emergency clinic about 6 miles from here. Not the main hospital. Smaller, fewer staff." Helen's eyes widened. "On the motorcycle?" Jack shook his head. "Not with this weather. I'd have to borrow a truck." "From who?" "The garage owner," Jack said. "He lives nearby. He won't like it." Helen hesitated. "Would he help?" Jack gave a short breath. "He might, or he might call the police or tell me to get lost." Helen tightened her grip on Frank's hand. "If there's a chance, we have to take it." Frank stirred. "Don't," he whispered weakly. Jack crouched beside him. "Don't what?" "Don't get yourself in trouble," Frank said, his voice barely audible. "We're old. You don't owe us." Jack felt something tighten in his chest. "You got pushed down and robbed in the street," Jack said. "That makes it my problem." Frank's eyes flickered. He did not argue. Jack looked at Buddy. "You stay here," he said. "Guard them." Buddy did not move. His eyes stayed locked on Jack. "I'll be back fast," Jack said. Buddy stood and followed him anyway. Jack sighed. "All right, you come with me." He wrapped the blanket tighter around Frank and checked the fire one last time. Then he stepped back into the cold night with Buddy at his side. The streets were quiet. The rain had left the road slick and shining under the street lights. Jack moved quickly despite the pain in his back. The garage owner's house sat behind a chain-link fence. One light was on. Jack knocked. Nothing. He knocked again, harder. A few moments later, the door opened. A heavy-set man in his late 50s stood there, wearing sweatpants and a stained shirt. His name was Ray Collins. He owned the garage where Jack worked. Ray had a thick neck, thinning hair, and a permanent look of irritation. "What the hell do you want, Jack?" Ray said. "I need your truck," Jack said simply. "Right now." Ray frowned. "What?" "2 people got robbed," Jack said. "Old couple. One of them's dying." Ray looked past Jack at Buddy. "You drunk?" "No," Jack said. "I'm serious." Ray hesitated. "You call an ambulance? No phone, no money." Ray rubbed his face. "This isn't my problem." Jack stepped closer. "It becomes one if he dies." Ray looked at Jack for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Keys are on the hook," Ray said. "You break it, you fix it." Jack nodded once. "Thank you." Jack ran back with Buddy. His legs felt heavy. His breath came hard. Inside the storage building, Helen looked up in alarm when she saw him return. "We're going," Jack said. "Now." Buddy moved immediately, positioning himself beside Frank. Jack lifted Frank again, pain exploding through his back. He grunted but did not stop. Helen helped as best she could. They moved slowly toward the door. Jack knew this might break him, but stopping was not an option. The truck smelled like oil, cold metal, and old coffee. Jack climbed into the driver's seat, his hands shaking slightly as he turned the key. The engine coughed once, then roared to life. The sound filled the quiet street and echoed between buildings. Helen helped Frank into the passenger seat with Jack's guidance. Frank's body was stiff and heavy, his movements slow and uncoordinated. He groaned softly when they shifted him, but he did not resist. "Easy," Jack said. "I've got you." Buddy jumped up into the back seat without being told. He turned around twice, then settled on the floor, directly behind Frank, his head close to the old man's shoulder. His eyes stayed fixed on Frank's face. Jack adjusted the seatbelt around Frank carefully, then climbed back behind the wheel. He took a deep breath before pulling away from the curb. The road was slick and dark. Rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet, and patches of ice clung to shaded areas. Jack drove slowly, gripping the steering wheel tight enough to make his knuckles white. Helen sat in the middle seat, leaning toward Frank. She kept one hand on his arm, the other gripping the edge of the seat. "You tell me if he gets worse," Jack said. "I will," Helen replied quietly. For the first few minutes, no one spoke. The truck moved through empty streets, past closed shops and dark houses. Traffic lights blinked yellow over silent intersections. Jack's back burned with every bump in the road. He adjusted his position, but nothing helped much. He focused on the road ahead and kept driving. Frank's breathing changed. Jack heard it before Helen did. The sound was uneven, broken. "Jack," Helen said, "he's breathing funny." Jack slowed the truck and pulled over near the curb. He He put the truck in park and leaned across the seat to check Frank. Frank's eyes were open but unfocused. Sweat covered his forehead despite the cold. "Frank," Jack said, "can you hear me?" Frank did not answer. Buddy moved closer, standing up and pressing his chest against Frank's arm. He let out a low, steady sound, almost like a hum. Jack felt Frank's neck. The pulse was weak and fast. "We don't have time," Jack said. "We have to keep going." Helen nodded, tears filling her eyes. "Please." Jack pulled back into the road. They had gone less than a mile when Frank's body suddenly jerked. He gasped sharply and slumped forward. "Frank!" Helen cried. Jack slammed the brakes. The truck slid slightly before stopping. Jack threw the gear into park and jumped out of his seat. He pulled Frank back against the seat and checked his breathing. Nothing. "Buddy," Jack said sharply. Buddy was already moving. He pressed himself against Frank's chest, then stepped back as Jack guided him aside. Jack placed his hands on Frank's chest. "Stay with me," Jack said. "Stay with us." He began chest compressions, steady and firm. His arms moved with practiced rhythm, driven by memory and training he never wanted to use again. Helen sobbed quietly, holding Frank's hand. "Please, please." Buddy stood close, watching every movement. He did not bark. He did not panic. Jack kept counting under his breath. After several long seconds, Frank gasped. A weak breath, but real. Jack stopped and leaned back, breathing hard. Sweat ran down his face despite the cold air pouring in through the open door. "There," Jack said softly. "There you go." Frank's chest rose again, shallow but steady. Helen let out a broken sob and pressed her forehead against Frank's arm. Jack closed the door and got back behind the wheel. His hands trembled, but he forced them steady. "We're almost there," he said. He did not know if it was true, but he said it anyway. The road narrowed as they left the main streets. The clinic Jack remembered sat near the edge of town, close to the highway. It was smaller than a hospital, but it stayed open all night. They reached the entrance 10 minutes later. The parking lot was mostly empty. Jack pulled the truck to the curb and jumped out. He ran to the door and pushed it open. A nurse looked up from behind the desk. She was in her early 30s, wearing scrubs and glasses. Her hair was pulled back tight. "We need help," Jack said. "Now." She saw Frank slumped in the seat and moved immediately. "Get him inside," she said. "Careful." 2 staff members appeared and helped move Frank onto a stretcher. Helen stayed close, refusing to let go of his hand. Buddy followed, stopping just inside the door. "No dogs," the nurse started. "He stays," Jack said firmly. "He helps him breathe." The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, just keep him close." They moved Frank down the hall quickly. Machines beeped softly. Bright lights hurt Jack's eyes. A doctor met them near a small treatment room. He was older, with tired eyes and calm movements. "What happened?" the doctor asked. "Robbery," Jack said. "Heart condition. He collapsed twice." The doctor nodded. "We'll take it from here." They worked quickly. Jack stepped back against the wall, his legs suddenly weak. He slid down until he was sitting on the floor. Buddy came and sat beside him, pressing his side against Jack's leg. Helen stood nearby, hugging herself, watching through the open door. After several minutes, the doctor came out. "He's stable for now," he said, "but he needs to be transferred to the main hospital." Helen nodded, tears running freely. "Thank you." The doctor looked at Jack. "You did the right thing." Jack nodded once. He did not trust his voice. Buddy rested his head on Jack's knee. Outside, dawn was just beginning to lighten the sky. The road behind them was quiet again. Morning light crept through the clinic windows, pale and thin. Jack sat on a hard plastic chair outside the treatment room. His elbows rested on his knees, his hands clasped together. His back ached constantly now, a deep pain that spread into his hips and legs. He had not slept. He did not feel like he could. Buddy lay at his feet, curled tightly, his head resting on Jack's boot. He lifted his head every time someone walked past, then settled again. He had not left Jack's side since they arrived. Helen sat across from Jack, her hands folded in her lap. She looked small in the chair, her coat still damp from the night. Her eyes were red, but calmer now. The shock had worn off, leaving behind a quiet exhaustion. A nurse stepped out of the room. "Mr. Wilson is stable," she said. "The ambulance from the main hospital is on the way." Helen stood immediately. "Can I see him?" Just for a moment, Helen went inside. Jack stayed where he was. A few minutes later, the doctor approached Jack. He held a clipboard and spoke in a low, careful voice. "You brought him in at the right time," the doctor said. "Another 10 minutes, and we might be having a different conversation." Jack nodded once. "He needs the main hospital." "Yes," the doctor said, "and long-term care." Jack hesitated. "What about payment?" The doctor sighed. "That's something the hospital will address, but I won't lie to you, it won't be easy." Jack looked down at Buddy. "It never is." The ambulance arrived shortly after. 2 paramedics came in with a stretcher. Frank was awake now, though weak. His eyes focused slowly as they moved him. "Jack," Frank said quietly when he saw him, "you stayed." "Yeah," Jack said. "I stayed." Frank swallowed. "You shouldn't have." Jack shook his head. "I didn't have a choice." Helen walked beside the stretcher, holding Frank's hand until the doors closed. Outside, the air was cold but clear. The rain had stopped completely. Jack watched the ambulance pull away, its lights flashing briefly before disappearing down the road. Helen stood beside him, hugging her arms. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. Jack shrugged. "You don't have to." She looked at him closely. "They took everything we had. The money. Our cards were expired. We don't have family nearby." Jack nodded slowly. "One thing at a time." Helen hesitated. "Where will you go?" Jack glanced toward the truck he had borrowed. "Back to work. I need to return that." They rode in silence. Buddy sat upright in the back seat, watching Helen carefully. At the garage, Ray Collins stood outside, arms crossed. His face was tired, but not angry. "You bring it back in one piece," Ray said. Jack nodded. "Thank you." Ray looked at Buddy. "Dog's got sense." "He saved a man," Jack said. Ray grunted. "Figures." Ray went back inside without another word. Jack leaned against the truck for a moment, stretching his back. Pain shot through him, sharp enough to make him breathe through clenched teeth. Helen noticed. "You're hurt." "Old injury," Jack said. "I'll be fine." She shook her head. "You carried him like it was nothing." Jack did not answer. They walked back toward the storage building together. Helen moved slowly, her steps careful. Inside, the fire had burned out completely. The space felt empty now. Jack gathered his things quietly. Helen watched him. "You don't have much," she said softly. "Enough," Jack replied. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is our hospital number. They'll call when he's transferred." Jack nodded and took it. Helen hesitated again. "Will you come with me to the hospital later?" Jack paused. He thought of his shift, his rent, his back, the thin line he lived on every day. "Yes," he said. "I'll come." Helen let out a breath she had been holding. Buddy wagged his tail once. Later that afternoon, Jack cleaned up at the garage. He changed into a fresh shirt, though his body still felt heavy. Buddy lay near the door, sleeping lightly. Jack counted the money in his pocket. It wasn't much. He knew what the hospital bill would mean. He also knew he wasn't walking away. As evening came, Jack locked the garage and headed out again, Buddy at his side. They walked toward the bus stop that led to the main hospital. Jack moved slowly, carefully, but steadily. He was tired, but he was still moving. The main hospital was brighter than the clinic, louder too. Jack stepped inside with Helen, the automatic doors sliding shut behind them. The smell of disinfectant hit him immediately. Machines beeped somewhere down the hall. People moved quickly, some in uniforms, some in street clothes, all of them carrying their own worries. Buddy walked close to Jack's leg, his harness brushing Jack's boot with every step. The dog's pace was slower now, but steady. They checked in at the front desk. Helen gave Frank's name with a trembling voice. A nurse typed quickly, then nodded. "He's in cardiac," she said. "Room 312. Helen let out a breath and pressed a hand to her chest. They took the elevator up. Jack leaned against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment. His back throbbed. His legs felt weak. He had not eaten since the night before. When the doors opened, the hallway was quiet. Frank lay in bed, connected to monitors and tubes. His face looked pale, but his breathing was steady. Helen rushed to his side. "Hey," Frank said softly. "You made it." She smiled through tears. "Of course." Frank's eyes moved to Jack. "You came too." "Yeah," Jack said. "Didn't want you thinking you were alone." Frank's lips curved into a weak smile. "Hard to scare off, aren't you?" Jack shrugged. A doctor entered the room, followed by a nurse with a clipboard. The doctor introduced himself as Dr. Harris, a man in his early 50s with tired eyes and calm movements. "We've stabilized Mr. Wilson," Dr. Harris said. "He had a serious cardiac event. We're adjusting his medication and monitoring his kidneys." Helen nodded, listening closely. Dr. Harris looked at Jack. "You're the one who brought him in?" "Yes," Jack said. "You did the right thing," the doctor said. "He would not have survived the night without intervention." Jack nodded once. Praise made him uncomfortable. Dr. Harris hesitated. "There is something else we need to discuss." Helen's hands tightened around the bed rail. "The financial office will speak with you," the doctor continued. "Soon." Helen's face drained of color. "We were robbed," she said quickly. "They took everything." Dr. Harris nodded. "I understand. We have social services here. We'll explore options." Options. Jack had heard that word before. It rarely meant relief. After the doctor left, a woman in a blue cardigan entered the room. She introduced herself as Linda Perez, a hospital social worker in her 40s, with kind eyes and a tired smile. "I'm here to help you navigate what comes next," Linda said. "Can we talk outside?" Helen looked at Frank, then nodded. Jack followed them into the hallway. Buddy stayed inside the room, sitting near Frank's bed. Linda spoke calmly. "Your insurance coverage is limited. There will be bills, but there are emergency assistance programs, charity care, and victim support funds, especially given the robbery." Helen clasped her hands together. "We don't have family nearby. We don't have savings anymore." Linda nodded. "That doesn't mean you're out of options." Jack leaned against the wall, listening. His head felt heavy. Linda turned to him. "You're not family?" "No," Jack said. "Just someone who stopped." Linda studied him for a moment. "Sometimes that's enough." They returned to the room. Frank was asleep now. Buddy lay on the floor beside the bed, his head resting on his paws. He lifted his head when Jack entered, then relaxed again. Jack sat down in a chair near the wall. It was uncomfortable, but he didn't move. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. Helen spoke quietly with Linda again. Forms were signed. Calls were made. Jack drifted in and out of sleep, his body finally giving in. Each time he woke, Buddy was still there. In the late afternoon, Frank woke again. He looked stronger than before, his voice clearer. "You're still here," he said to Jack. "Told you," Jack replied. Frank's eyes softened. "Helen told me what you did. All of it." Jack shifted in his seat. Anyone would have done the same. Frank shook his head slowly. "No, they wouldn't." Helen stepped closer. "We don't know how to repay you." Jack looked down at the floor. "You don't need to." Frank studied him. "You work hard?" "Yeah," Jack said. "Hard enough." Frank nodded. "So did I. 40 years. They sat quietly for a moment. Later, Linda returned with good news. "The hospital approved temporary charity care," she said. "It doesn't solve everything, but it helps. A lot." Helen covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "Thank you." Linda smiled. "There's more. A local fund supports victims of violent crime. It may take time, but you're eligible." Jack watched Helen's shoulders relax for the first time since he met her. As evening came, Jack stood slowly. His back protested loudly. "I should head out," he said. "I have work early." Helen looked surprised. "You don't have to." "I'll come back," Jack said. "I promise." Frank nodded. "I believe you." Jack knelt beside Buddy and clipped the leash back on. The dog stood carefully, joints stiff, but tail wagging once. As Jack turned to leave, Helen stopped him. She pressed a small piece of paper into his hand. "Our address," she said. "When Frank's better, please come." Jack looked at it, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. "I will," he said. Outside, the sky was turning orange and gray. The day was ending. Jack walked toward the bus stop with Buddy at his side. His body hurt. His wallet was nearly empty. Tomorrow would be hard. But for the first time in a long while, Jack felt like staying was the right thing. 2 weeks passed. Life did not suddenly become easier, but it became steadier. Jack kept working at the garage. His back still hurt every morning, and his hands were always sore, but he showed up on time and did his job. Ray Collins noticed. He didn't say much, but he stopped complaining. One afternoon, he handed Jack an envelope with extra hours written on it. "You earned it," Ray said. "Don't get used to it." Jack nodded. "Thanks." Buddy waited by the door every day, sleeping lightly, always ready when Jack stood up. His steps were slower now, but he still followed Jack everywhere. Jack visited the hospital every other evening. Frank Wilson was improving, slowly but clearly. His color came back first, then his voice. He joked with nurses and argued politely with doctors. Helen stayed by his side, reading to him, helping him eat, reminding him to rest. When Jack walked into the room, Frank always noticed. "There he is," Frank would say. "Thought you might have gotten tired of us." Jack shook his head. "Not yet." Buddy became a familiar sight on the ward. Nurses bent down to pet him. Patients smiled when he passed. Even the head nurse eventually stopped reminding Jack about hospital rules. "He's calming," she said once. "We could use more of that." One afternoon, Linda Perez stopped Jack in the hallway. "I wanted to tell you," she said, "the Victim Assistance Fund approved their case. It won't cover everything, but it's enough to keep them afloat." Jack exhaled slowly. "That's good." "There's more," Linda added. "Frank's old union reached out. Someone shared what happened. They're stepping in." Jack nodded, unsure what to say. That night, Frank asked Jack to sit down. "You saved my life," Frank said plainly. "Not just that night. After." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "Anyone would have." "No," Frank said firmly. "They wouldn't." Helen reached into her bag and pulled out a small object wrapped in tissue paper. She placed it in Jack's hand. Inside was a simple metal watch, old but clean. The glass was scratched, the band worn thin. "It belonged to our son," Helen said softly. "He passed years ago." Jack froze. "I can't take this." Frank shook his head. "You're not taking him. You're carrying him." Jack looked down at the watch. His hands trembled slightly. "I don't know what to say," he said. Frank smiled. "Say you'll stay in touch." "I will," Jack said. "I promise." A month later, Frank was discharged. Jack helped bring them home in Ray's truck. The house was small but clean. Helen made coffee. Frank sat carefully in his chair, Buddy at his feet. "You always stop when you see trouble," Helen said quietly. Jack shrugged. "Someone stopped for me once." She nodded. "Then keep stopping." Jack left that evening as the sun went down. He walked Buddy back toward the bus stop. At the corner, he paused. "You hungry?" Jack asked. Buddy's tail wagged once. Jack smiled. Life didn't change overnight. Jack still worked long hours. Money was still tight. His back still hurt. But now, when Jack rode his Harley home at night, Buddy behind him, the city didn't feel as empty. Jack was still here, and that was enough. Sometimes, miracles don't fall from the sky. Sometimes, God sends them through ordinary people who choose to stop and care. In everyday life, we all pass by someone who is hurting. The real question is not whether we can change the world, but whether we are willing to help the one right in front of us. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and may God bless you and everyone watching.